In spite of her busy schedule, Martha taught herself to cook the food she had tasted in Europe. She tested every one of Julia Child's recipes. To learn how to beautify her apartment, Martha visited auction houses. Soon she was buying antique furniture and transforming her surroundings.
I remember a dinner party. I think fairly soon after they had gotten the apartment and had decorated it the way they wanted it. But it was an elegantly presented, beautifully prepared evening meal. Everything they did, they wanted to be of the highest possible quality.
There was only one thing missing: the money to pay for it. Andy's beginning salary was not that high, and Martha's modeling career was about to be put on hold. She was expecting a baby. In September of 1965, Alexis Gilbert Stewart was born, Lexi for short.
I remember getting her card describing the birth of Alexis, and it was from sister to sister, and it was heartrending. I just will never, I have it, and I just will never forget how excited and how joyous and how wonderfully, warm and emotional she was, and so happy to have this baby.
As happy as she was, Martha had to get right back to work. But as a young mother in the competitive world of modeling, Martha found it increasingly difficult to find jobs. She and Andy were desperate for money, so Martha turned to her father-in-law for advice. With his support and Andy's encouragement, the 27-year-old Martha set her sights on Wall Street. She'd heard about a young, aggressive firm that was looking for new energy. When she walked in for the interview with the head of the company, he saw dollar signs.
I kind of knew right away that this woman would be an instant success. She was from a modest background, which I think helped. She was highly cultivated. She was Columbia educated. She was very attractive, and, it was almost a can't-miss situation.
Martha studied hard, passed her broker's exam, hired a nanny, traded in her modeling clothes for a business suit, and dove in.
Being a stockbroker was not an ordinary job for me. It was every day you start at zero, every day it's tough, every day you go out and have a lunch, and you have really interesting clients. My clients were the most interesting men in New York.
Martha's unique combination of good looks, smarts, and natural ambition were tailor-made for Wall Street. From 1968 to 1971, a time when many women were just starting to gain access to the workforce, Martha was commanding a six-figure salary.
She made a lot of money. She was enormously successful, by those standards, or even by today's standards.
By 1972, Martha and Andy decided to move out of the city altogether. They found an old farmhouse in Westport, Connecticut, badly in need of repair. It was just the kind of project they were looking for. It was in Westport where Martha Stewart's desire to create the perfect life would take shape. In 1972, the 31-year-old Martha Stewart moved to Westport, an affluent and artsy suburb in the heart of Connecticut's Gold Coast. She and her husband Andy saw Westport as the perfect community to put down roots.
They wanted to get away from the city, they wanted to build a nice life, and Martha had this kind of idealized life in mind where you lived very well, very nicely.
Accomplishing that would take a lot of work. Their house on Turkey Hill Road was built in 1805. It seemed as if nothing had been done to the place ever since.
And I remember coming back from Texas, where my husband was in law school, and going to this house and thinking, oh my Lord, I can't believe two people with a baby are living in this chaos. It was just a wreck of a house.
Martha and Andy were both holding full-time jobs in New York. They worked nights and weekends on the house, tearing down walls, building new rooms, and repainting the inside. Martha hand-stenciled the floors and oversaw the construction of a restaurant-sized kitchen. Outside, the couple cleared trees, planted elaborate gardens, and even built a chicken coop. The Stewarts were like homesteaders. They called their 6-acre spread Turkey Hill Farm.
Poor old Andy used to have to go work in the morning before he took off for the train station to go to New York. He was up 4:30, 5 o'clock feeding the chickens and doing all the rest. But Martha was doing it too.
But commuting into the city every day, raising her daughter, and rebuilding the house were taking a toll. So at 32, Martha quit her job to stay at home. Andy had a new job in publishing and was now making enough money to support the family. Martha could now spend every hour of the day finishing her house and perfecting the art of entertaining guests with her gourmet cooking.
It was just incredible when you think that she was raising a daughter and cultivating all these hobbies. She really could do all these things. She could really make a peach pie better than anyone's peach pie. You know what I mean? She could really make a sandwich that was better than anyone's sandwich.
As Martha's reputation as a hostess continued to grow, she realized that in her passion for entertaining, she had the foundation for a new career. In 1975, she placed an ad in the local newspaper offering her services as a caterer. And when the phone rang and the client wanted to know if she could cater a wedding, Martha was elated. She put all her time and energy into that first job. Andy pitched in. Martha's mother came up from Nutley to help too. She was proud to see her daughter launch a business.
It was a hot August Saturday, I think, and the eggs en gelée were melting, and she only had one refrigerator then. And things, if anything could go wrong, everything could have gone wrong, and yet everything was a big success.
Before long, Martha started getting more clients, and a part-time job became a full-time profession. She joined forces with two other women. Their company, The Uncatered Affair, did weddings, cocktail parties, and birthdays. All the dishes she had experimented with at home were now on public display.
She would fill the whole table, and it would be rows upon rows of cherry tomatoes and cauliflower, and then big cabbages that were opened up, all the leaves opened up and dips inside. I mean, that was, she was using food as art.
In the late 1970s, baby boomers were just beginning to buy homes and entertain guests. Martha's healthy and creative way of catering was perfectly suited for the times. But her drive for perfection was not easy for her partners to take.
She could be very rough around the edges. She would lose her temper if things didn't go the way she wanted them to. And some people can take that, and other people can't take that. And basically, what Martha would say is, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. And very often people did walk away, or people felt they were being taken advantage of.
The company eventually disbanded, and Martha decided to go it alone. At first, it was daunting to run her own business, but Martha knew there was a lucrative market for the kind of high-priced events she had been perfecting. Her business grew rapidly. Andy's publishing career was also flourishing. He had a recent success with an illustrated book titled Gnomes. He was set to release a similar book called Fairies. Andy arranged for Martha to cater a lavish party for the book's release. A publisher in the crowd was so impressed, he offered Martha a book deal on the spot.
Well, what she had, and aside from being a caterer, was a very, very brilliant creative mind. The first thing she did was make it pretty clear that this was going to be her book, and she had ideas of what she wanted, and if we didn't want to do it the way she wanted to do it, she wasn't interested in working with us, I'm sure.
Martha collected more ideas for her book, but its publication would have to wait. In 1979, Martha got word her father had suffered a severe heart attack. The man who had driven her to be successful passed away. He was 68. Martha was 38. Martha was determined to use her father's memory as inspiration for her book. Working with a writer, Martha poured out all of her ideas about how to entertain with flair. The book came out before Christmas in 1982. At $35, Martha Stewart's Entertaining was one of the most expensive cookbooks to be published. It was an instant success.
I don't entertain all the time, but when I do, I want to make it a very special thing for my friends.
It was Martha unleashed. She is a force of nature, and she is visionary, and her will runs along iron rails, and she was going to be somebody.
Hold that right like that.
It didn't matter that this ex-model stockbroker caterer wasn't Julia Child.
The lunch consists of a red pepper soup.
But But critics were quick to find errors in her book. A food writer in California accused Martha of plagiarizing her Chinese recipes. They settled out of court. The New York Times tested other recipes and said they couldn't make them work. Despite those setbacks, Martha's creative approach to entertaining found a huge audience across the country and across nearly every economic and social line.
I like to put the tables in pretty places, be it down under the orchard or right here by the pool.
In a few short years, Martha Stewart would invite millions of people to join her in creating a fantasy life of good food and gracious living. But along the way, the woman who had worked so hard to create a life that symbolized perfection would lose some of the very people who made up the picture.